Hi, welcome to ESLG 472, Teaching English for Specific Purposes. So it's 472, Teaching English for Specific Purposes. As you probably guessed, I'm Dr. Gina Petrie. I'll be your instructor for the course. And I really want to tell you that I think this is a key step that you're taking in your profession. If you're in this course, that means that you are probably very likely to be planning to teach overseas and to teach English overseas at some point. And for those of us who end up teaching overseas or to end up volunteering overseas to teach English, often what we end up doing is teaching not general English, but teaching English to a group of people who have the same profession, the same occupation, the same needs. And that's what ESP is. When you're not teaching general English, but you're teaching a very specific form of English, it has its own vocabulary, it has its own grammar that it calls upon, it has its own ways of communication. That's what ESP is. For most of us who end up teaching overseas, we usually go overseas thinking we will teach general English, and then we get offered a course or a new job, and really it's ESP. For most of us, we have to figure it out on our own. But for those of you in this course, what you will have is you'll have the benefit of us thinking through this together. And instead of getting in there and figuring it out on your own, what you will have is you'll have the benefit of my suggestions from my years of doing and supporting ESP teaching. And so that's what this course is. So you might be, even as you're listening to this introduction, still not quite sure about what ESP is, and yet at the end of this course, you will already be creating your own course in ESP, designing lessons, choosing the best strategies, analyzing language, analyzing needs. And we're going to cover a lot in these hours that we spend together. So let's take a look at how I have the course organized. So take a look here. So Unit 1 will take the first 4 weeks of the course, so not quite half of the course, but almost. And the reason for this is because I need all of us to have 4 kind of solid pieces that we can work from and work with as teachers of ESP. And each of these 4 pieces will take about a week in our course. And the first thing that we're going to cover in Unit 1, that first piece, is what is English for specific purposes, and how is it different from general English? By the end of that week, you will be able to identify the differences, even when things get confused a little bit. If someone says they're teaching ESP, but it's definitely not ESP, an ESP approach, you'll be able to pull those two things apart, which is really key, because most people teaching ESP around the world are not actually teaching ESP. They're teaching general English. So you will be able to tell the difference, and that means you'll be able to design a truly ESP classroom for your students. The next step that we will tackle is a key step in ESP, and that is the needs analysis. One of the key differences between English for specific purposes and English for general purposes is for ESP, we base every choice, or rather we should base every choice we make in the classroom directly to what someone needs, whether that's the students in the class, or it's their employers, or it's the customers or the clients who will be working with those students when they're in their jobs. But everything we choose to do in our classroom comes directly because somebody needs it. And that's why you need to know how to carry out a needs analysis. There's lots of different forms of needs analyses out there, some more complicated, some others not. And what I've done for you for this course is I've kind of put together my own form. And it really will be something you can take with you into the profession and step by step walk through that process. It's also something you can share with a program director or someone else that is assisting you with the program. And perhaps it'll be of help to them too. Now, a key element of the needs analysis is to analyze the language that is needed in the situation that you're preparing students for. The reading, the writing, the listening, the speaking. Maybe it's all 4 skills, maybe it's only 2. But how do you analyze language? How do you become a language detective? Now, this is part of the needs analysis, but I've pulled it out as a standalone piece because for a lot of students, it's kind of daunting. It's a little challenging. Many of us are still not really comfortable that we entirely know what a prepositional phrase is, or the difference between a modal verb and a verb, or what a phrasal verb is, for example. And so I'm going to pull apart this piece, and at the end of that week, you're going to feel very confident about your abilities. And I've already got resources to help you wherever you are in your understanding of how language works, and specifically how English works. You will have the resources that you need to support you with that. And I guarantee at the end of that week, you will be analyzing language in workplace situations like you didn't realize that you could. The very last step that we take in Unit 1, and it's a key step I feel very strongly about, are what are the methods that are needed by ESP? Many people who teach ESP, they may carry out the needs analysis, they may design the course around the language students need, and yet they teach with the very same methods that they might teach a general English class. I argue it calls for extremely different methods. And so I will share with you my thoughts that have come both from my experience and from my own research, as well as what the literature tells us as well. And I will share those with you. And at the end of that week, you too will be able to identify when those methods are in play and when they aren't, and which strategies might be best. So that's the foundation, the general foundation that we're going to build up. Very theoretical, but with many cases that we'll apply it to. In Unit 2 and in Unit 3, something wonderful happens. Together, we are going to look at the English that's needed by medical workers. I will walk you through lots of cases, lots of written documents, lots of examples of doctors and patients talking, and together we will carry out a needs analysis. Together we will analyze language. Together we will decide what could a syllabus look like. In other words, what would the scope of the sequence and the sequence be of what we would teach? And what would a typical lesson plan look like? What would the choices that you might make with that? We will do that as well with Unit 3, English for Police. And again, I will support you not quite as much. Now you're starting to step out a little bit more on your own without as much scaffolding. But in both of these pieces will be supporting each other with figuring out how that language works. Finally, Unit 4, this is where you really make it your own. You put into play what you've learned so far and what your skills, the skills that you've developed, and you will create your own ESP course. So that means you'll design a syllabus, you'll design some lesson plans, and you will carry out kind of a minimal needs analysis, but some type of needs analysis to demonstrate that you can do that, that you can design the course around it, that you can apply the methods and the strategies that best practices in ESP point us to. And my goal is at the end of this course, you feel pretty confident about what you're able to do. And so you don't just fall into teaching of ESP, but rather you seek it out and you embrace it. And